For over 50 years, they were the greatest duo in cinema history, the blue-eyed angel and the bearded giant. But while the world laughed at their slapstick fights, Terence Hill saw the hidden pain behind Bud Spencer's smile. He saw the industry vampires draining the giant's life and the physical toll that broke his body. Now, the surviving brother is finally breaking his silence to expose the dark reality of Bud's final days. But before we unlock the autopsy file on his final breath, we must understand who poisoned his spirit. Terence Hill has finally identified the specific industry titans whose egos, negligence, and cruelty left invisible scars on the giant. These are the men who broke his heart long before his heart stopped beating.
Clint Eastwood, the shadow that froze the sun.
To the world, Clint Eastwood is the icon of the Western, but to Bud Spencer, he was the symbol of the ultimate professional rejection. Terence Hill reveals that for decades, Bud lived in the cold shadow of the man with no name. The tension wasn't just artistic, it was personal. Bud Spencer created a new genre, the comic Western, that saved the Italian film industry. Yet whenever their paths crossed in Hollywood or at European festivals, Eastwood treated Bud not as a peer, but as a circus act. Terence recalls a heartbreaking incident in the late 80s where Bud, seeking to expand his serious acting career into the U.S. market, reached out to Eastwood's production company for a potential collaboration. He was met with a silence so loud it shattered his confidence. Eastwood's camp reportedly viewed Spencer as a mockery of the genre Eastwood built. This wasn't just a snub, it was an active blockade. Terence claims that Eastwood's dominance sucked the air out of the room for actors like Bud, who were physically larger but lacked the ruthless political machinery of Hollywood. Bud carried this rejection like a physical weight. He felt that no matter how many millions of tickets he sold, the serious kings of the genre viewed him as nothing more than a fat man throwing punches. This constant psychological belittlement from the top of the food chain contributed to Bud's deep-seated depression and his feeling of an imposter in his own industry, a stress that ravaged his heart over time.
Sylvester Stallone, the thief of the physical crown.
If Eastwood wounded Bud's pride, Sylvester Stallone destroyed his relevance. Terence Hill exposes a bitter truth. The rise of the 80s American action heroes was built on the ashes of the Italian strongman. Bud Spencer was the original powerhouse, the man who used his fists, not guns. But when Stallone arrived with Rambo and Rocky, the industry shifted overnight from the gentle giant to the violent killer. Terence watched as Bud was pushed out of the market by a new wave of hyper-violent cinema championed by Stallone. But the hurt went deeper. There are reports of scripts and concepts that were originally developed for the Hill-Spencer duo being repurposed and absorbed into the American action machine. Bud saw his style of physical comedy being erased and replaced by the steroid-fueled rage that Stallone popularized. Stallone represented the machine that made Bud obsolete. Terence noted that in the later years, Bud would watch the success of The Expendables, a celebration of old action stars, and feel the sting of exclusion. He was the grandfather of the genre, yet he was never invited to the table. Stallone's monopoly on the tough guy market in the 90s forced Bud into obscure TV projects, leading to financial instability and immense stress. The Italian Balboa was left to rot while Hollywood celebrated the American version. Giuliano Gemma, the reckless rival. While the Americans hurt his pride, the European rivals hurt his body. Terence points to the era of competition with stars like Giuliano Gemma, Ringo. In the golden age of spaghetti westerns, the stunts were real, and the safety regulations were non-existent. Terence reveals that the competition to be the toughest led to reckless on-set behavior from rival actors and stunt teams. Bud was a man of immense size, and because of that, other actors felt they could hit him harder. They treated him like a prop, not a human being. Terence recalls moments where rival actors trying to prove their masculinity against the giant would land strikes that were far too real. Giuliano Gemma, a master of agility and stunt work, represented the physical standard that Bud destroyed his body to keep up with. The pressure to compete with the athletic prowess of men like Gemma forced Bud, a man of heavy build, to perform dangerous falls and stunts that destroyed his joints. Every time a rival star raised the bar for physical danger, Bud had to match it to keep his paycheck. This arms race of stunts, driven by the egos of his contemporaries, left Bud with microfractures, cartilage damage, and chronic pain that would plague him until his dying day. They used his size against him, assuming he was unbreakable, until he finally broke. And now we arrive at the heart of the darkness. This is the file that has been kept closed for nearly a decade. These are the 30 heartbreaking truths regarding the death, the agony, and the final moments of Bud Spencer, as witnessed by the only man who truly knew him. Terence Hill is done protecting the industry. He is here to protect the legacy of his brother. The 30 final truths. The failing architecture. The official reports say natural causes, but the truth was a systemic collapse. Bud's skeleton had been pulverized by 50 years of falling on concrete. His knees were bone on bone, a torture that made every step in his final year a journey through hell. He didn't just die, he was crushed by his own history. The hidden heart failure. Bud concealed the severity of his heart condition from the public and even from Terence for years. He didn't want to stop the movies. By the time he sought help, his heart was functioning at a fraction of its capacity, exhausted from pumping blood through a body that had taken too many hits. The blindness of the eagle. A devastating secret. Bud was losing his sight. The man who communicated with his eyes was living in a blurring world. Terence noticed Bud memorizing scripts by ear because he could no longer read the pages. The fear of total darkness terrified the giant more than death itself. The diabetic curse. His love for food was legendary, but it was also his poison. Uncontrolled diabetes ravaged his nervous system. Terence saw the tremors in Bud's hands, not from age, but from nerve damage that made it impossible for him to sign autographs for the fans he loved. The respiratory silence. Years of smoking cigars and inhaling dust on desert sets destroyed his lungs. In the end, the giant could barely whisper. Terence describes nights where Bud slept sitting up because lying down meant he couldn't breathe, a slow, terrifying suffocation. The stolen royalties. Bud Spencer generated billions for studios, but he died with a fraction of what he deserved. Terence exposes the Hollywood accounting that robbed Bud of his residuals. He was paid flat fees, while producers bought islands with his sweat. The bad investments. Trusting the wrong people was Bud's fatal flaw. He poured money into business ventures pitched by friends who vanished when the money ran out. Terence watched helplessly as vultures circled the dying lion, stripping his assets under the guise of financial management. The tax nightmare. The Italian authorities hounded him until the end. Instead of honoring a cultural icon, the tax system froze his accounts over disputes from decades prior. The stress of potentially losing his home contributed massively to his final decline. The charity scam. Bud gave millions to charity, but Terence reveals that some of these organizations were frauds. Discovering that his goodwill was stolen broke Bud's spirit in his final months. He felt he had failed the children he tried to help.
The cost of care. The medical bills for a man of his size and condition were astronomical. Specialized equipment, private nursing, and treatments drained his liquidity. It is a dark irony that the man who made the world rich had to worry about the cost of his own survival. The concussion legacy. Bud took thousands of hits to the head for comedy. Terence believes Bud suffered from CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. The memory lapses, the sudden mood swings, and the confusion in his final years were not just age, they were brain damage from the movies. The spinal cage. He broke his back multiple times on set, injuries that were hushed up to keep insurance costs down. In his final days, the fused vertebrae caused him agony that no morphine could touch. He was a prisoner in his own frame. The mystery bruises. Terence noticed bruises on Bud's arms during his visits. Whether from clumsy caretakers or the fragility of his skin, it looked as though the world was still beating him up. It was a visual reminder of his vulnerability. The botched surgery. There are whispers of a hip surgery in his 80s that went wrong, introducing an infection that his body never fully fought off. This was the beginning of the accelerated end, a medical error buried in paperwork. The liver's revolt. It wasn't just food, it was the painkillers. Decades of taking high-dose anti-inflammatories to get through filming destroyed his liver. The toxicity in his blood was slowly poisoning him from the inside out. The phone that stopped ringing. The most painful truth. When Bud got sick, the industry vanished. Directors he made famous, co-stars he carried, they all disappeared. Terence was one of the few who stayed. The silence of the phone hurt Bud more than the physical pain. The unfinished script. Bud died with a script on his nightstand. He and Terence were planning one last hurrah. He was holding on to life for that project. When he realized his body wouldn't allow it, he let go. It was the death of hope that killed him. The fear of irrelevance. Bud watched modern movies and felt like a dinosaur. He told Terence, "They don't want heroes anymore, they want monsters." He felt the world had become too cruel for his brand of gentle strength. The sad clown paradox. The man who made the world laugh was crying inside. Terence admits that Bud spent days staring out the window, lost in a deep melancholia, mourning the friends and the era that had already died.
The burden of the beard. He felt trapped by his persona. He wanted to be recognized as Carlo Pedersoli, the swimmer, the inventor, the pilot, but the world only wanted the dumb giant. He died feeling misunderstood by the masses. The fall at home. The catalyst for the end wasn't a disease, it was a fall. Alone in his room, the giant fell. He lay there for hours before help arrived. Terence believes the shame of that helplessness broke his will to fight. The refusal to eat. In his last week, the man who loved food refused to eat. It was his way of taking control. He decided it was time to leave the table. Terence begged him to eat, but Bud simply smiled and shook his head. The last smile. Despite the agony, when Terence walked into the room for the last time, Bud mustered the strength to smile. It was the same smile from Trinity. He was acting strong for his little brother one last time. The family shield. He waited until his whole family was in the room. He fought the Reaper until his wife held his hand. He didn't want to die alone like the characters he pitied in his films. The last word. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a complaint. It was grazie. Thank you. Terence reveals this wasn't just gratitude. It was a release. He was thanking them for letting him go. The immediate regret. Terence feels a haunting guilt. He believes if he had pushed for the reunion movie sooner, Bud would still be alive. The purpose would have kept his heart beating. The cold body. Touching Bud's hand after he passed, Terence was shocked by how small he seemed. The life force that filled the room was gone, leaving only a shell. The giant had left the building. The secret tears. Terence didn't cry at the funeral for the cameras. He cried in the bathroom of the hospital. He lost his other half. He admits that he still talks to Bud every day, hoping for an answer. The missing tribute. Hollywood ignored his death. No montage at the Oscars, no statue in Los Angeles. Terence sees this as the final insult, the final proof that the industry never deserved Bud Spencer. The spirit in the desert. Terence says that when he went back to the desert in Almeria to film his tribute, a sudden windstorm kicked up out of nowhere. He believes it was Bud, finally free, running in the wild, waiting for his brother to join him. We have witnessed the medical collapse and the financial betrayal. But for Terence Hill, death was not a termination of the contract. It was a transition into a spiritual guardianship. Terence reveals that his relationship with Bud Spencer has evolved into a connection that defies medical science and financial logic. In this exclusive chapter, we open the file on the psychological bonds, the financial sacrifices, and the spiritual interventions that keep Terence Hill alive. These are the 10 final truths about a legacy that conquered the grave. The 10 spiritual and financial truths. The antidepressant dream. Terence confides that his primary defense against chronic depression is a recurring vivid dream. In this state of deep REM sleep, they are young again, sitting by a campfire in Almeria. There is no cognitive decline, no physical pain. Terence reveals that these dreams function as a form of spiritual therapy. He wakes up with his dopamine levels restored, feeling mentally rejuvenated without the need for medication. He believes this is Bud's way of managing his mental health from the other side, prescribing him a monthly dose of peace to combat the anxiety of loss. The grief management ritual. To the outside world, setting an empty chair at the dinner table might look like psychological trauma, but for Terence, it is a necessary coping mechanism. He reveals that during family holidays, the empty chair is a non-negotiable rule. It stabilizes his emotional state. He insists that the energy in the room shifts, a tangible drop in stress hormones when the wine is poured for Bud. It is his personal method of grief counseling, a way to maintain emotional equilibrium by refusing to let the memory fade into the void. The asset of time. On Terence's wrist sits a vintage watch given to him by Bud, an item of immeasurable sentimental and market value. Terence is obsessive about winding it, viewing it as a lifetime commitment. He uses the rhythmic ticking as a grounding technique to manage panic attacks. He told a close associate, "If this watch stops, my time stops." It is more than jewelry. It is a psychological anchor, a daily mechanical routine that keeps his anxiety in check and reminds him of the prosperous times they shared. The multi-million-dollar boycott. Since 2016, Terence has made a shocking financial decision. He has rejected millions of dollars in contracts from major American studios. These were high-paying offers to use his likeness in modern action films. However, Terence prioritizes brand integrity over liquid assets. He views these offers as a devaluation of their shared legacy. He swore an oath never to sell out their history for a paycheck, proving that his financial independence allows him to protect Bud's dignity in a way that money cannot buy.
The investment in immortality. While refusing new income, Terence is liquidating his own capital to fund a massive preservation project. He has become a private investor in his own history, buying back intellectual property rights and funding the 4K restoration of their classic films. He is spending a fortune on digital asset management, ensuring that the original negatives do not rot in storage. His goal is not ROI, return on investment, but cultural preservation. He is ensuring that future generations inherit a pristine digital legacy, securing Bud's image against the erosion of time. The equine therapy sign. During the filming of My Name is Thomas, a strange event occurred that bordered on spiritual manifestation. A wild horse walked onto the set and stood pressing its head against Terence's chest. Medical experts know that equine therapy can lower blood pressure and heart rate, and Terence felt an immediate physical shift. He broke down, convinced that this was a sign from the universe, a biological intervention sent by Bud to lower his stress and give his blessing to the project. The auditory guidance system. Terence claims that in moments of high decision-making stress, he experiences a specific auditory phenomenon, the faint whistling of the Trinity theme. He does not view this as tinnitus or a neurological firing. He interprets it as an intuitive signal. It serves as his internal compass for risk management. When he hears the tune, he knows he is on the right path. It is a sensory connection that guides his life choices, reducing the decision fatigue of living alone. The executive director from beyond. When Terence directed his final film, he admitted he wasn't making executive decisions alone. He would pause, close his eyes, and consult his internal partner. He credits Bud as the unseen consultant on the payroll. He believes Bud's instinct for comedy is still active in his neural pathways, guiding the creative direction and ensuring the product honors their brand. It is a unique form of leadership psychology where the living partner executes the vision of the deceased. The estate protector. The most honorable truth involves estate planning and protection.
Terence made a deathbed promise to act as the guardian of the Pedersoli family's welfare. He has kept this word, using his influence to shield Bud's widow and children from legal predators and media harassment. He acts as an informal executor, ensuring their privacy rights and financial security are never compromised. He provides a safety net that insurance companies cannot offer: the loyalty of a brother. The longevity strategy: radical joy. The final truth is a shift in lifestyle strategy. For a year, Terence suffered from the physical symptoms of grief, weight loss, and lethargy. But he realized that stress was a silent killer that would dishonor Bud's memory. So he implemented a mental health protocol of radical joy. He swore to live fiercely, to ride his bike, and to boost his endorphins to laughter, just as Bud would have wanted. He treats his happiness not just as an emotion, but as a medical necessity to survive the loss. Every smile you see today is a victory over the darkness. The giant has fallen, and the laughter has faded into silence, but the files are now open. Terence Hill has fulfilled his duty as the guardian of the truth. He has shown us that Bud Spencer was not just a character, he was a warrior who absorbed the blows of a cruel industry to protect his family and his fans. He died of a broken body and a weary heart, worn down by the American gods who stole his crown and the vultures who stole his gold. But the legacy cannot be killed. Every time you watch Trinity, remember the pain behind the punch. Remember the man who gave everything until he had nothing left but a thank you. Terence Hill remains, standing alone in the sunset, carrying the memory of his brother. Do not let the industry erase him. Share this truth. The giant deserves to be remembered, not just for how he lived, but for how he survived. The file is closed, but the memory is eternal. Subscribe and honor the legend. The dragon is watching, and the giant is finally resting.